Hello, my name is Laura Stone, and this is my educational autobiography. This is my journey to understanding my ethnicity as a Caucasian Spanish American locally and globally with an adventurous and active lifestyle. I have the firm belief that you learn from experiences, and I've begun to dissect the process of learning and belonging with my ethnicity. Being asked often as a child if I was white or non-Latino or Latino Hispanic, I read National Geographic's definition and got that race is a category of humankind that shares certain distinctive physical traits. And ethnicity is a large group of people classed according to common racial, national, tribal, religious, linguistic, or cultural origin of background. Nonetheless, I'd like to dive into a sequential chronological order of how I learned about my race and ethnicity. And just a little shout out to Annapurna Base Camp, where I made it with about 18 students in December before lots of the lockdowns. This is a bit of the background of my father. I feel like my parents are a big part of my ethnicity. So my dad is one of nine. His dad passed when he was 10. He was a middle child, and there was a bit of tension between the nine children once dad passed away, and understanding who was boss in the house, if you will, amongst the kids. But he drove trucks when he graduated from school. He didn't graduate college the first time, but eventually, living paycheck to paycheck, he made it to California, where an uncle sort of gave him a helping hand so he could get on his feet and get his degree as an electrical engineer. This, on the other hand, is my mother. Is she got her teaching education because her parents felt that that was a better thing to do than become an artist. They felt it was more secure. And so she got her teaching education around the time that before her parents passed away, when she was not even 25. When that happened, Spain was also going into a recession. So she went to London, she learned English, and was actually brought to California under a program that was bringing bilingual teachers to the district. And she became a second grade or an elementary school teacher in Compton, which was interesting for her. In Long Beach, my parents met, and they were both studying, they were both getting on their feet, and they had me. So they had to sort out getting me daycare, child center, babysitters, and I just had to include Lupe here as well because she was sort of the family friend who took care of me when mom or dad had odd hours at work, or even when I went into elementary school. I would always stay at her house until one of my parents could pick me up. So these are, I guess, in all of this, the one thing they have in common is that all of these places, Spanish was extremely important. So I knew that Spanish was important as part of my ethnicity and my belonging. This is when I made it into elementary school. In elementary school, this is fourth grade. So in third grade, I was in a GATE class, but I didn't pass the test until fourth grade. I remember fourth grade being quite difficult. Maybe as an emergent bilingual, but this is my friends. There were actually other languages that they spoke at home, but I guess at school, the English was the language we had in common, so Spanish wasn't as important to me in elementary school. Nonetheless, this is also a Spanish mission, so I was pretty stoked about being at a Spanish mission at that age. Just being proud of that part of the culture. This is Stanford Middle School. So when I was in middle school, there's just one story that I remember so clearly, and it was PE class. They were building up the gym, so we didn't have PE uniforms. We didn't have anywhere to change into it, so we didn't have to run. I was always a teacher's pet, so I ran past this group of Mexican boys in my group of, I would have been 50 plus students in my class, and they just made a snark little comment in Spanish, and when I responded in Spanish, they were just extremely surprised, like, oh. But it was nice because at the end of that day, they pulled me over and they kind of asked like how a white girl knew Spanish. So I explained that my mother was from Spain, and I just felt that being able to speak Spanish was a big part of my ethnicity, a big part of my culture in middle school, where I definitely wasn't speaking it as much. This is my high school experience. I couldn't find specific photos, but it was definitely a lot more diverse than my elementary school. Um, in color more than anything, I definitely learned more about it. There was my 10th grade year, there was shootings, there was lockdowns at Long Beach Poly, and I definitely was a bit removed from that. But then we went to a camp, and my high school volleyball team, my last year, sort of opened my eyes to the fact that there were people who actually were involved with this, who did understand gang affiliations, whose family, whose culture, whose race was affecting them. And that's when I realized that my culture wasn't just my language, it was also my race. And being white in America made that really different experience for me, whether I spoke Spanish or not. It opened doors, but it didn't close any for me, to be able to speak Spanish. And I think what struck me the most in high school was when I still remember his name, Ariel Bournet, very intelligent Black kid in my group. He shared with us that he was on the basketball court, and his other kids from other academies were just like, "Oh, you're one of the white kids," basically saying that because he was smart, he was white, and he had to basically stand his ground and say, well, Black people can be smart as well. You shouldn't say Black people aren't smart. And that's when I realized that that's the perception that some Black students even had of themselves in high school. So yeah, I guess this is where I kind of realized that I was proud to be an American, to be a part of the diversity of this mix of cultures, but I also realized that being white, I wasn't in the midst of a lot of the attention that people of color received. When I went to college, I definitely wanted to get to know my Spanish heritage a bit more. This is a group of Spanish college students, which was new for me because I hadn't met that many Spanish people my age. And we were in science classes together. So this is one of the studies that we were doing, really hands-on. It's when I changed to science, but it's when I realized that my Spanish was pretty outdated. It was what was cool maybe when my mother was a kid, and it was very preppy and professional. But this is when I was living Spanish, eating Spanish food, on an eating Spanish schedule, conversing, dreaming, all of those things was Spanish. About halfway through my year abroad, I also made friends with some Americans who understood European American culture, who understood Jewish culture, who understood that in America there was this college experience, and we were able to share that college experience of traveling abroad together. So this picture in particular is us in Austria. One of our friends was from Austria, so we were able to be a part of these festivities and get a feel for the Austrian culture as well, which was a really cool experience. After I studied abroad, I couldn't stop thinking about traveling. I had met some Chileans, and this here is actually when I was working as an outdoor educator in Chile. And the paper, I don't know if you can see it on that old train, is telling us that the train wasn't going to get there today. So in this scenario, it was just a lot of, problem solving. We were supposed to be doing community service in the rural area. About 8 students went in our emergency van vehicle, and they were doing great help for the local community with their vineyards because they didn't have quite the workforce. And then the rest of us ended up fitting into that same van about 6 hours later. But before then, the students on this trip, they got to see how tough but how beautiful the rural life could be, and to really appreciate the moment where they are and see community service as a learning opportunity more than a us helping them opportunity. So it was kind of a blend of classes in Chile, and it was a beautiful thing to be a part of. But it's definitely where I learned a bit more about how people perceived myself being Spanish, being white, and how we could be lazy and love siestas and taking naps, and how we speak differently. And yeah, I think I was proud of being Spanish American, but I sort of began to understand the privilege that I had in my favor my entire life. Since then, I've traveled quite a bit more. I did environmental projects in Thailand, went to Borneo with students, Nepal, Peru, Fiji, and I've just decided to kind of slide into the culture that is traveling. And this is full-heartedly being able to make mistakes and enjoy living life whilst in Vietnam. I just thought I'd share it for a good laugh. Love laughing at myself when I'm working with kids. It is weird talking to myself for a presentation, but thought you could get a laugh from it as well. I'll head back to the presentation. And from these experiences, I developed a relationship for the concept of education, of being in different cultures. Even Australia was it's still a different culture from America, even though it is also considered a developed country. It is also primarily white, because the indigenous people, there's definitely not as much of an indigenous showing in the south of Australia, where I was mostly based. And I also got to meet my partner, who was kind of a bit of a troublemaker, if you will, when he was in school. So he's kind of kept me really level-headed and grounded when it comes to education and behavior management. And I guess in a way where people can do things that you don't quite expect, and whether it be because of their culture, because of their ethnicity, because of their class, because of their background, you make them feel comfortable. You make them feel like they belong, whether you belong or not. Because in this case, I was the one who was from a different place. And then I guess I can always look back on my sounding board. There's this is my close-knit family, if you will, of educators, of people who have had their own experiences, who've lived in different places, who've formed relationships with different people, and they kind of keep me grounded when I may be in the wrong, and give me a different perspective when I need to hear it. So I'm pretty excited to become an educator, and hopefully a prominent multicultural educator, with the confidence that I have in who I am and how my ethnicity has evolved the more I travel, and the more I feel attuned or camaraderie with these different cultures where I've spent a lot of time. And on that note, I won't keep you any longer. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, see ya.